The Army Corps of Engineers has a unique role. It oversees military construction and develops new technology. It also undertakes civil works like protecting and restoring the nation's waterways. Lieutenant General Scott Spellmon is the commanding general. General, welcome to the program.
Mimi, thanks for having us on the program today.
So the Army Corps of Engineers has a massive portfolio. Give us an idea of about how many projects you've got at any given time.
Mimi, it's thousands of projects, certainly across the country, but also we're working on projects large and small in 110 different countries around the globe today. Over the past several decades, our annual program had been between $20 to $22 billion. Today, that program's above $90 billion and growing. A fascinating time to be an engineer and to be in the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well, a big part of your work is managing the nation's waterways. Give us an idea of what that means.
Yeah, so this mission came to us, really was the foresight of President Jefferson back in 1802 when he established the United States Military Academy at West Point. President Jefferson knew that we were going to need a cadre of engineers to help our growing nation. And the initial mission area that came to the Corps of Engineers was to open our nation's waterways so that we can move people and goods to market. So today, we continue to operate our waterways. We own and operate 234 locks on the Ohio, the Mississippi, the Tennessee River, the Cumberland, the Snake, and the Columbia that help drive our economy. I would just add later in the early 1900s, following a number of devastating floods on the lower Mississippi and South Florida where thousands of Americans perished, Congress federalized flood control, and that mission also came to the Army Corps of Engineers. And so today we own and operate 715 dams across the country. So you can imagine just this historic rainfall that's falling on California. 31 of those dams are in that state and saved a lot of lives and property.
You know, I was going to ask you about climate change because I would imagine that's having a big impact on your work.
It's something we deal with every day, whether it's our coastal projects. As a matter of fact, this week we were out in North Carolina serving some future projects that we have there to deal with this very acute challenge in parts of our country. But it also affects our inland waterways with changing precipitation patterns that we are noticed that affect the upper Missouri and the Great Plains.
The Army Corps of Engineers received over $17 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law. Tell me how that money's going to be allocated.
Right, and so that helps us get after a large backlog in projects that we had in our portfolio. So a backlog project is a project that Congress has authorized that we have completed a study on. And at the time, before the bill, we had about $90 billion in backlog projects. So this allows us to take a big dent in that. And certainly we're working with industry, we're working with our academic partners to be innovative and get these projects in the ground as quickly as we can.
So give me an idea of some of those projects that you would be using this bipartisan infrastructure law
so
for.
a number of port deepenings. I visited the port of Wilmington, North Carolina this week, where we want to take, the state would like to take that from a depth of 44 feet down to 47 feet, and that would allow these larger post-Panamax vessels to come in. So there's a number of port deepening projects across the country that we will address with this funding. I own 577 federal navigation channels that we're responsible for. And again, it's those navigation channels that help drive our economy. There's a lot of flood protection work, so think of levees and improvements to our dam systems that I mentioned earlier that make it more safe for the American public for the work that they do and the recreation that they do out on our nation's waters.
You've also worked in the Florida Everglades, and you do ecosystem restorations. What is that, and why are you involved in that?
Right, so this was a mission that came to the Army Corps of Engineers in the early 1970s. So you can think of the environmental legislation that was passed in that part of our country's history. Think of the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act. Because of our experience on the nation's waterways, whether it been for navigation or flood control, Congress authorized us to undertake aquatic ecosystem restoration. So today we're working, you mentioned a huge program down in restoring the Florida Everglades. We're also working on salmon recovery in the Pacific Northwest and a lot of habitat and environmental work on every waterway in between.
You're involved in cleaning contaminated and toxic sites. Are those only on federal property?
No, absolutely not. And so in the news of late, we have a program called the Formerly Utilized Sites Remedial Action Program. So these are all of the sites that the nation used in the 1950s to develop atomic weapons. And those waste products were still in the environment. This mission came to the Army Corps of Engineers in 1997, and we are working 21 of those sites across the country and cleaning up some of that waste. A huge mission and growing mission for us as well.
All right, well, General, stand by. We're going to take a quick break and then come back.
Thank you.
When we come back, we continue our conversation with Lieutenant General Scott Spellmon. He's Commanding General of the Army Corps of Engineers. We'll be right back. We're back with Lieutenant General Scott Spellmon. He's Commanding General of the Army Corps of Engineers. General, another big component of what you do is research and development. What's the Army Corps of Engineers' role in that?
Yeah, Mimi, so we say our vision in the Army Corps of Engineers is engineering solutions for our nation's toughest challenges. And I tell people for some of these challenges, we don't always have good construction solutions for. So I will give you two examples. I mentioned our work on environmental restoration out in the Pacific Northwest. We have been in litigation since the early 1990s on salmon. We don't know yet how to get a juvenile salmon that's about 3 inches long off of a high head dam that we built back in the 1940s and 50s since the passage of environmental laws. So we have a huge research and development program. What's the best way to construct a chute, a ladder, something that will help us? So it's something we're working very hard on. The nation's experiencing drought. We talked about California earlier. For many, many years, we made hydraulic decisions behind our 715 dams when to release water after the rainfall had hit the ground, and sometimes that's too late. So we have a program now that's being driven by our research and development called Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations. So we just had a atmospheric river hit California, and in our projects, several of our projects in California, we can actually make decisions on water management to hold on to water or to release more water well before that storm ever hits the ground. And you can imagine in a time of drought, every drop of water counts, and that's what this research and development program, massive research and development, we're working to grow it. That's what we're trying to do.
You know, construction projects, though, are notorious for being behind schedule and over budget. I wonder if there's anything that you're doing to look at that.
We are. Some of the challenges that we're having of late deal with supply chain. And so recently at Tinker Air Force Base, I was behind 4 months on 4 hangars that were going to house the new KC-46A tanker. And we needed a 5-inch self-tapping screw with a 3-inch washer that you can buy at Home Depot. But I needed thousands of them, and they were stuck in the supply chain. And it took us 4 months to get those in sufficient quantities. Those roofs are now on those hangars, but just unexpected things. Getting Portland cement to 2 schools that we're building in Fort Campbell, Kentucky has been a challenge of late, and that has put us behind schedule. So we've revised our reporting scheme in the Army Corps of Engineers, where now commanders are reporting up on all of these issues, so we can work with all of our partners and with industry to get after them.
You know, the Corps of Engineers is obviously part of the Army, but also it serves other military branches. How is that interaction with the other services?
So we do major construction, certainly for the Air Force, at time for the U.S. Navy, but it's beyond Department of Defense. So today we do major construction for the Veterans Administration, for Space and Missile Defense Agency, and many other federal partners that would like our assistance. As I mentioned earlier, working in nearly every state across the country and about 110 countries across the globe for all of our federal partners.
I wanted to ask you about those 110 countries. What are you doing overseas, and how does that help Americans?
So these are projects large and small. So on the small side, it could be a small well in South Africa, where we're working with the State Department with a partner there. And on the other extreme, it could be work that we're doing today in Poland, 113 projects that the Polish government is paying for that is helping NATO in its expansion, and to also help our soldiers as we work the current conflict to support in Ukraine. And we're learning things from current events on not necessarily the types of projects, but where those projects go. So it's a dynamic time and a great opportunity, a great time to be in the Army Corps of Engineers.
And you're also working with FEMA when there's an emergency. How does that work?
Right. So we are FEMA's engineers during periods of national disaster. So under the National Response Framework, the Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for what they call Emergency Support Function Number 3, Public Works and Engineering. And so that's everything from providing temporary emergency power, say, to a hospital or a communication center that loses power after a storm. We place roofs on families and homes that lose the roof in these storms. We do infrastructure assessments. We do debris removal. We're doing debris removal today in California out in Santa Barbara. And again, it's all designed to help these communities get back up on their feet as quickly as possible.
Your budget, as you mentioned, is over $90 billion. Give me an idea of the size and the makeup of your workforce.
Right, so today we are blessed with 38,000 men and women in the Army Corps of Engineers. Only 800 of those are military personnel like me. The other are incredibly talented civilians, engineers from all disciplines, public affairs specialists, attorneys. And we say people are our #1 priority in the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're working hard on our leader development programs because we're working on the next senior executives that are going to help us deliver this massive program in the years ahead.
Are you having any trouble recruiting? Because I would imagine it's such a cool place to work.
People want to work for the Army Corps of Engineers because I tell people we're not building Walmarts, right? Most of our projects are unique. They're one of a kind, and it is a fascinating place to work. The Army, as you know, is having a recruiting challenge at the time. Our industry partners in the construction trades are also having a recruiting challenge. So every opportunity I get, I love to talk to young men and women, and maybe college is not for them, or not for them right now. And these young men and women can make a great living out in the trades.
I can't let you go until you tell me about the CAT calendar. The Portland district recently published a calendar. What's that about?
Yeah, we're always after some innovation, and they certainly found some in our public affairs space. We had a challenge out in the Pacific Northwest, keeping people off of levees during flood season, keeping people off of jetties that go well out into the Pacific Ocean, and people falling off these jetties and getting hurt. We tried a number of different ways to communicate with the public. Someone had the idea, let's put a big cat on our safety messages. And public started paying attention to this more and more, and they made a calendar out of it. So I told the team, whatever keeps people safe, use it.
All right. Well, General, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.